A show that tackles the big issues affecting the BVI and the rest of the Caribbean. Searches for answers to today's big questions and gives viewers a unique perspective on developing stories. Follow the big story with me, Kathy Richards, only on GTV. This show is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, Cyril B. Ramney Tertola Pier Park, NV Salon Spa Nail and Barbershop, HOV Medical, and Digicel. Sign up for Digicel Plus Home Light Bundles, faster internet, movies, and sports. This is The Big Story. I'm Kathy Richards. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this edition. In studio with me, we have Mr. Jasen Penn, Director of the Department of Disaster Management, and Mr. Andrew Jackson. He's a meteorologist that is here in the Virgin Islands, and this says a whole lot of development. Actually, every year when we sit at this time here, we have one person, basically. And so we're happy to know that, you know, we are moving places when it comes to following weather patterns and all of that in the Virgin Islands. Right now, it's a season of celebration. We are gearing up for emancipation, festivities. We have already started, but there's another season that we're into, that's the hurricane season. And so we need to be even more prepared for it. Jason, we see that, you know, like we would have said in the previous interview that we would have done, that this season is going to be very busy. Lots of busyness taking place, and we've seen that already in action.
Most definitely, Cassie. And good morning to all our viewers as well. We've seen that we've had our first major hurricane for the season, Hurricane Beryl. Hurricane Beryl, we've seen across the various platforms of how it has impacted our brothers and sisters in the southern Windward Islands. Beryl overall would have affected 10 different states. That's quite a bit of our brothers and sisters from the southern Windward Islands going all the way across to Belize, Jamaica, Cayman Islands. As part of Haiti, all those different locations would have been impacted. With that being said, it's a clear indication that things are changing, and we are pretty early in the season. Andrew would give a more in-depth explanation in terms of what we may see going forward in the season, but I'd just like to highlight that we did indicate early on, as you said, Cassie, that the season would have been a very active one. Initial reports coming out from the various forecasting agencies, in particular the National Hurricane Center, they would have indicated the possibility of 23 named storms, 11 hurricanes, 5 major hurricanes, and we've already have one, and we are just in July. So I'll allow Andrew to expound a bit more in terms of not just what we're dealing with for the hurricanes. We would have seen the various flood events as well. Maybe kind of give an idea based on the climatological conditions, as well as how we may look for the next few months.
All right, so before we get into those nitty-gritties, we got to know you a little bit, right?
Sure.
Just give us a quick rundown, a little background of Andrew, the meteorologist.
Well, as you already said, my name is Andrew Jackson, and I'm the meteorologist here at the Department of Disaster Management. I recently started since last year, and I've been here since.
Where your expertise came from?
The CIMH, that's the Caribbean Meteorological Institute for, sorry, the CIMH, Caribbean Meteorological Institute for Hydrology.
Okay, awesome. So, like, the Jason would have led us into it. Help us to understand this season.
All right, this season is a very interesting season, and it's a bit different from last year, where there was a bit of disparity into where the season might be, whether it have been an above or near normal. But this year, there are two factors that really are driving this season. And I'm pretty sure you have heard the term about the place about La Nina and sea surface temperatures being very high. So I'll start with the one that is very dominant, which was also a major player in the way Beryl developed. And that's the sea surface temperatures along with the depth of which that heat is in the ocean. So it's very high, and it has been very high for some time, and the temperatures that we're experiencing now in what, June? July, early July, we would have been expecting those like probably August, September. So that should give you an idea of we are ahead of schedule. And usually what do we expect in August, September? September, they're about the peak of the season to be there where we expect more seas, storms, and all of that. So with that being said, we could be expecting more storms and even them to be more severe. Let's look at Beryl. Beryl was a tropical storm for not very long, and then it just exploded into what we saw as to be a Category 5, and it remained a major hurricane for a very long time. And even though it had conditions that were opposing it, it managed to fight it off. So just imagine when we go into the season where things should get more favorable. Those are things we should be a bit concerned about. Now I mentioned also the La Nina. What I would say to the public that they should pay attention when it comes down to the La Nina. What it is, it's something that is a feature that allows for very low wind shear, vertical wind shear. But what does that mean? It simply means that if we have a system that's like this, because it will grow up in like a column, right? So what the wind shear does is like when winds that are opposing to that system. So if it's less, then there's less opposition. And if there's less opposition, it means that the system is able to develop a little better. And with the fuel that it is getting from the sea, that's what we will have. And a term that you will probably hear is rapid intensification. So in other words, getting stronger very quickly. And we saw that with Beryl. It is also possible that we could see more of that happening. And something that I pointed out in other interactions is that the tracking of these systems could bring them very close to the islands. It could be a Irma situation where they are tracking very close. Last year we had 20 named storms, but what happened with most of them? They tracked away from the territory. We could see a difference this year.
Why are you convinced that there could be a major difference this year?
All right, it has to do with how you would from time to time when you listen meteorologists and their weather forecasts, you will probably hear them make mention of a high pressure system or a high pressure cell. What that basically is, it's like a fence that is in the whole basin or the whole region of things. So you would have the region or the territory here. For this year, the high pressure is like just north of us and it's very dominant. So when those storms are coming across, that high pressure is actually creating that barrier. So they will tend to trap that westward movement for most of the time. And depending where that storm develops, it could just move right over us here in the territory.
Oh, wow. This says we really need to be prepared. And another thing that we need to look at, even while Beryl was far away from us, we would have been experiencing quite a number of heavy showers and intermittent rains, but a little bit of flooding here and there, but the seas has been quite rough. Let's talk about that a little
And
bit.
that's something that I am happy you pointed out. We are a marine community here in the Virgin Islands. We have a lot of interest as it pertains to that. So what you might find happen, even though a system such as Beryl might be a few hundred miles out, what it does is those winds propagate what we call swells or waves towards the region, and you might find that those might deteriorate our conditions even ahead of the storm. So that's what we saw. Even though we didn't have any form of quote-unquote direct impact or major or significant impact from where we did see our sea conditions deteriorate. So just imagine if we had the storm tracking closer to us, we could see where we could have more coastal issues to deal with, like coastal flooding, and depending on the tide, you might see where other communities or areas or districts could also flood. And as you mentioned earlier also, the floodings that happen, those happen, especially I think two of them happen outside of the season, pre-season actually. And it wasn't a system, it wasn't anything major. It was just a setup where it had a stream of moisture that was moving throughout the territory and kind of sat there for a while. And conditions just happened to be on point, just like how you would have a fire and you add some fuel to it, it just blaze up at that particular, because it never lasted long. So saying all that to say that we need to ensure that we don't take this season lightly, and we should try to do what it is that we can do to be prepared.
Okay, Jason, so let's look at preparedness from the level of the disaster management. Prior to us going on here, we started that conversation about developing our own meteorological station. Let's have a conversation about that. Where are we heading and why it's so critical in this time?
Thank you, Cassie. Well, the development of having our own meteorological office has a number of varying factors, not just for hurricane itself, but also economical. You have the particular aerodrome that needs to be monitored. That's to deal with weather for the airports. We have our agricultural sector that is on the verge of being developed. Having critical weather information for that is also needed. We have our fisheries, whether you believe it or not, coral bleaching. All these are particular things that are affected by extreme climate or even weather. That segue into our tourism product. We have our marine industry that deals with a lot of boating, shipping, sea-type activities. All that surrounds weather and having accurate information. And we have our long-term development for the country. Sea level rise. Sea level rise, the heat that we are now experiencing, does that mean we have to now look at changing particular policies in terms of how people work, the hours, the clothing?
Oh yes.
All that involves having critical weather information, and also by having a office that is here locally would allow for, I would say, proper forecasting, proper data collection, and monitoring of these particular hazards locally, where the persons on the ground would have an idea of the topography of the island, have an actual idea of the sea conditions, the coastal areas. All of these particular things cannot be readily forecasted properly by someone that is possibly 100 or a few hundred miles away. There are models, yes, there are instrumentation that is used, but by having the resources, having the expertise in everything within country, gives develops or is able to provide a more accurate type of forecasting. So progress is being made. The ministry has been working in the background. The Caribbean Meteorological Organization would have been here in the territory, would have had discussions with the ministry where the subject matter falls, and there's development happening. There's a framework and roadmap being developed in terms of getting us to that particular avenue. Likewise, we have Andrew, Mr. Jackson here with us. That is a great first step compared to what we might have had in previous years. So, although progress may seem slow, there are things that are happening in the background to get us to that point eventually.
Okay, as it is now, we see our information coming mainly from Antigua. What structure do we have? Because we have a med person here. What is he actually able to gather? What infrastructure do we have, though limited, to work with to make sure that we can make some assessments for ourselves?
Okay, that's a very good question. And if you were listening to what Mr. Penn was just saying, is that having a local Met office is our ultimate goal, and it takes time. But what do we have currently? We currently have like a number of weather stations throughout the territory that we gather data from. We have our local weather stem that gives us live local information. So where I fit in this whole model, I am the person on the ground that lays with Antigua. So some of the products that Antigua has, I have somewhat access to them. So what I do is like I work with Antigua alongside them, being that bridge that connects the Virgin Islands with Antigua, so that we could put out weather forecasts and information like that. Coming from Antigua, it just means that they are the official forecasting agency for us here. So that's basically what is happening with that. But as it pertains to me, I work alongside with them, along with what we have, and we try to, get the information out as best as possible as we can. And the thing about it is, which Mr. Penn also spoke about, is weather and climate kind of goes hand in hand. So you need to have an idea what has been happening, what's going on now, so that you could actually see what is going on further. So when we could take the necessary steps, though it may seem slow, we are getting there. The fact that I am here, the fact that we are having more than one meetings and discourses with the regional body, and I am pretty sure that they are liaising to the international body, it goes to show that we are making progress.
Okay. There are other aspects of being ready for a hurricane season, which we should already be fully ready. Shelters, collaborating with the other NGOs and support arms that work along in times like these. Where are we?
In terms of the shelters, Cassie, we would have published the shelter list just at I think at the end of May, beginning of June. There's a total of about 26 shelters added on the list. These shelters range from category 1, 2, and 3. I'll try to explain. The persons that are able to go on our website and download the list, category 1 shelters will typically entail shelters that we would use before. They would include shelters that have possibly places for cooking, showers, sleeping, or it could be separated, maybe Cat 1, Cat 2 shelters, maybe shelters that may not have showers, but do have his and her bathrooms, and possibly places for sleeping. The category 3 shelters, we tend to leave them for maybe after impact, based on the locations and based on what the amenities that they don't have. What I would encourage persons at this time in particular to shelters is to review that list, look at where you are located, and maybe try and gauge exactly where the closest shelter is to you in particular. We also do encourage that persons who visit shelters do carry at least a 3 to 5 day supply of maybe food and water as well, even though feeding arrangements will be made to augment at least for those first initial days, so you could be sufficient for yourself. Next thing, in terms of coming to a shelter as well, you also have to bear in mind that the shelter is still not your home. There may be things that you may want to work with to make yourself comfortable. I would assure you or encourage you to actually do that. There are rules that you have to follow when in a shelter, so you have to also come to the shelter with an open mind that certain practices or things that you're used to doing in your personal space may not be accommodated at the shelter itself. And we also do encourage persons, if you have to shelter and you're looking for comfortability, you should maybe seek friends or family who can aid or thank you during that period, and you can have the shelter as a last resort, but they are available, 26 of them throughout the territory, for those persons that may need them. I know you also mentioned in terms of NGOs,
Yeah.
and we have been in conversations with a number of them. Red Cross being a very key NGO, we've had discussions with them. I would urge persons to visit Red Cross, reach out to them, check their various websites, see what information they have. Red Cross does do a lot for the community, not just here, but varying communities in the region internationally as well. They are very well recognized throughout the world and even within the region. We've also engaged the Rotary Club, which is a very good partner of ours. We've had several meetings, and we're having meetings with them, Lions, and some other organizations in terms of preparation efforts, and even for other events that we may have planned before the initial high point of the season. Now, if I were to shift in terms of preparation for persons, this I'll speak a bit about in terms of family and in terms of business. At least in preparation in terms of a family perspective, we've always indicated to persons is to have a plan. And what that plan would typically include, just as an example, could be key contact numbers, evacuation routes, who is responsible within the family to do certain things within the plan, whether someone would be responsible for getting the food, taking care of the vehicles, making sure the gas at the house is turned off. The kids could have their own part within the plan as well, so they can be involved. Remember to get your particular toy, have your shoes, have this, have what you need, so that if we have to move, we have all those things together. Now for the businesses now, around this time, or should have been before, that your employees actually know what's included within the plan, or what is the plan for the business. Who would go home first to get things ready, maybe some type of roster system, who would stay, who would be essential, who would be non-essential. And I'll go on to even say that one of the things businesses can do as well is in terms of business continuity planning. Maybe post-impact, how do they perceive the business to continue? What would that plan entail? Whether it's the purchasing of generators, whether it's having essential employees that would report to work to the office or would report remotely. If businesses do have means of which employees, if the actual business continuity plan is to move off-site or off-island, how would that be done? These are things now that they should be discussing or should be within the plans of ensuring that all persons involved actually know. That's particularly, in a nutshell, potentially from a planning aspect. The other things that you typically have to do are stock supplies or communications. How do we perceive to communicate? Whether we could afford satellite phones, whether we could afford to have the small VHF radios, the radios that persons can purchase over the counter, that are not too expensive if they're within a particular community and they want to formulate a community plan for themselves, that how they plan to execute that. They can have communications in other aspect that way as well. So while we are having, I wouldn't say downtime, but at this slow time when things are not as active, particular things that were not in place or you were not able to put in place, now is the time and try and have that done. I know that we are in tough economic times. There's a lot that persons still cannot do. I would just urge persons to still try their best. They could reach out, as I said, to Red Cross, other NGO type organizations to see what assistance can be rendered. There's the social development department that usually, I wouldn't say usually, that does assist with a vulnerable population. If you know of persons, elderly persons that may be living by themselves, or persons that may be physically and mentally challenged, you could call the social development department so that those persons can be registered, and individuals, and if something does happen, you have a clear indication of how to reach out in a system.
Awesome. We cannot doubt those factors that we all discussed here. But as we come under the tyranny of the clock, about to close off on this, there is one thing that keep coming back to my mind is what 2017 would have done to this territory mentally. That was a very traumatic season for us, a very traumatic experience. And if you move around, you still hear persons talk about it. The wind blows and it howls a bit, and it brings back that traumatic feeling. And with that trauma is a big factor, fear. And when persons are fearful, thinking clearly is not necessarily the thing that they can do well, and so they freeze. So we see some showers, people panic. We experience a little flooding that you would have alluded to before, which was not a real system. People panic. In closing, I would invite each of you to speak to our people so that, give them that assurance that, yes, you can get ready. You need to be ready, despite you would have experienced this in 2017.
All right, I'll start. In previous discussions that we've been having, we have been encouraging people to not worry and to be ready. I hear you mention about Irma in 2017. The good thing is we are here to talk about it, right? So that's a good thing. We survived it. And with that being said, we should find, if we're having those traumatic experiences, so to speak, seek help and find ways to protect our mental health. Even in our daily jobs, we need to protect our mental health so that we could actually, these plans that we here at the department are talking about, we are able to execute them when the time arises. But before I hand over to Mr. Penn, I should point out though that it's a very active season that we're expecting. The Virgin Islands could possibly see more flooding events as we go along. Like in the mid-summer, we could experience some more heat events. And like I always mention, it's good that we have this information so that we could at least we know what to expect, so that we can prepare as best as we can for it. And as I will close off with what I started, don't worry too much. Yes, you can be concerned, but at the same time, we survived Irma, right? Let's use that as a starting point. We survived it, and Irma was massive. So we could survive more once we are ready.
Yes.
We have those plans, not just have them in my head, Mr. Penn, or your head. We have to sit down, go through these plans. So you would know what your role is. I would know what my role is. Mr. Penn would know what his role is. So everything can integrate.
Awesome.
Well, that's a great summation that Mr. Jackson gave. From my aspect, in other settings that I've indicated to persons, it only takes one. At least we've seen what Beryl have done to our brothers and sisters, and we've also experienced Irma Maria in 2017, and a flood previous to that as well. So three events. What I would say for us this time around, this is why we're urging persons to prepare as much as they can. I do understand the anxiety. A number of us would have gone through traumatic events during that time. Some of the lessons learned from that event is by being able to offer psychosocial help to persons that need it. It doesn't matter across wealth or cross sections. All of us would need it at some point. So persons can reach out to the ministry where there are mechanisms to get persons that type of counseling, that type of assurance during or even after a particular event that could assist them in that regard. But echoing again what Mr. Jackson has said, if we use this time now to have our plans, to prepare, listen to the information that are coming out from us. We make every effort to provide information along the way. As we indicated, we cannot rule out being impacted or affected by a major system, but if you're prepared, have your communication devices. I forgot to mention one of the devices that we seem to disregard, but it's still very important, a transistor radio. Transistor radio, whether it has solar charging capabilities, winding capabilities, batteries. Ensure that you have one. That way, if we are to get information out and constantly feed information to persons, if there is something that's heading towards us that potentially can have major impact, we can continue to feed information to the public to tell them, hey, these are the particular locations you might need to seek help. They're going to be out through the communities doing the initial assessments, listen out for the all clear. These are the things that you need to be doing or need to have. All that information we will try to provide as timely as possible to the public so they could have an idea of what it is that they need to do. The key thing is that we want to ensure, and at least that the persons or the citizens living within this country, country, knows exactly what the next steps would be. I think that will reduce any type of panic if persons at least have information beforehand or even during of how they should proceed in being able to get the assistance they need if that is required. So again, my close off, do your best, prepare as much as possible, and it only takes one system to wreak havoc.
See it loud, see it soft, see it a bit quiet. It's been said, and it's the fact that what we need to do. I want to thank you, Mr. Penn, and thank you, Mr. Jackson, for stopping by. The doors of JTV is always open to share information so that we can make sure that all of our people are safe and are comfortable during this season. Listen, we're preparing so much for this artist and that artist and for festival. Yes, we have to Shane. Got so many orders, and this site has got so many orders for our clothing and all the fancies. Let's sticking things that we also need to be prepared for a hurricane season. Those of us who shop at the thrift shops, remember they got transistor radios, torch lights, and all these things there too. So let's be prepared as much as we possibly can. I want to thank you so much for your time. I'm Kathy Richards.
We know that where you choose to bank matters, and it is your vote on what your funds do in strengthening our community. As your official Bank of Paradise, we invest and support the lifeblood of our economy by helping in the realization of personal goals for homeownership, education, and entrepreneurial visions, which support small businesses. We make it our place to connect with persons and worthy causes, and we have been doing so for more than 30 years. Where your money goes and what your dollars empower are your choice. And we thank you for choosing us, a bank that gives where it matters the most, for you, for our community, and a happier tomorrow. The National Bank of the Virgin Islands.
Are you searching for new home decor items that reflect the season's latest trends? Look no further than Right Way Home. From cushion sets to decorative vases, we have unique pieces to suit every style and budget. Discover your right find at the right price, only at Right Way Home and Right Way Stores.